are revisiting the topic jointly with a panel of speakers who are experts in their areas and who worked in the areas for a very long time, both as advisors to many countries like Dr. Anwar Shah and Dr. Asha Pasha, of course, who brings enormous hands-on experience as the finance minister of the province of Punjab. And of course, we have other panelists who will be introduced by Mahwish. Let me start off by emphasizing how important the issue of municipal finance is for Pakistan. Everybody knows that Pakistan is urbanizing very rapidly, and it is projected that nearly half the population will be living in urban areas in about 30 years. And moving to urban areas means two things. One, they will need productive jobs, and they will need services so that the quality of life in urban areas is what they've come for. So that will put enormous pressure on city governments to provide the services, which means enormous pressure on revenues, the need for revenues to pay for those services. So given this growing importance, we need to, in Pakistan, do much better than we've done in the recent past. Total revenue mobilization for municipal taxes, for example, property tax mobilization has been extremely low. Just to give you a comparison, Punjab province, which is more than 100 million people, collects less in property tax than the city of Chennai alone, with a population of 10 million people. So this has to change if we will be able to meet the challenges of urbanization that are coming forth. We'll need to work on all fronts. We'll need to work on improving tax policy, principally that involves getting rid of exemptions, and I'm sure speakers will talk about it. It also involves strengthening tax administration, as many speakers will refer to, and it also involves delivering much better what we already delivered, so that willingness to pay taxes increases. I'm not going to say much more than that because, as I said, we have a very eminent panel of speakers, and they have a lot to say on each of these topics. So let me stop there and welcome World Bank Country Director Naji Ben Masood. Naji is I've just gathered that Naji is not here, but somebody will be standing in for Naji. So let me welcome that person, yes. and also state that in Naji we have an enormously gifted World Bank staff member looking after the Pakistan program. Not only is he gifted intellectually, his heart is in the right place. I've always been deeply impressed in my conversations with Naji about how strongly he feels about Pakistan's development and how committed he is. So with welcome, I'm sure Naji's representative is just as equipped intellectually and emotionally to support Pakistan. So very much welcome you. Let me just say a word or so about CDPR and this platform. CDPR is a consortium of research organizations, the IGC, Ideas, and SERP, We also work very closely with the Mehboob Haq Center at LUMS and with the Lahore School of Economics. And what we do in the consortium is that we bring together researchers and policymakers on a platform to disseminate good quality research, good quality policy-oriented research. So that's the platform, and I'm delighted that the World Bank has joined us in that platform, not only because World Bank does enormous amount of policy research itself, but also because World Bank wants to share that research with other researchers who are not necessarily at the World Bank. So this provides a fantastic opportunity for this platform to bring the latest policy research findings to a large audience. So with that, let me invite Mavish, who's going to lead the panel, moderate the discussion today. She comes with some of the best academic qualifications that you can get, PhD from MIT, and a rich research experience working with SERP on property taxes. So it's fantastic that we have her to moderate the discussion. So over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Nabi, and thank you everyone for joining us. I'm delighted.
I beg your pardon. I think over to the World Bank country director and his representative.
Of course.
Thank you very much. My name is Gailus Drogales. I'm Naji's deputy as the operations manager for Pakistan here in Islamabad.
Very welcome. Very welcome.
Great pleasure to meet you, Dr. Nabi, and all of the esteemed panelists. And we're very pleased to have Mavish moderating this discussion. And by way of background, I did work on municipal development funds early in my career at the World Bank in Europe and Central Asia. But welcome everyone to this Pakistan Development Policy Series. It's the 7th webinar series looking at municipal finance and asking the question to our panelists, how can local governments generate own source revenue, which of course is one of the key building blocks to a more responsive local government, a government that can respond flexibly to the emerging needs of its constituencies. We are returning after a bit of a hiatus and are very excited to kick off with this topic, our series in this new calendar year. Just by way of history, our previous discussions covered a wide range of policy issues, such as closing the agricultural tax gap, potential of secondary cities, unlocking Pakistan's income tax potential, girls and boys learning, among others. We will continue to collaborate with CDPR, local think tanks, researchers and local academia under Naji's leadership. And he's very much devoted and committed to expanding our dialogue with a broader group of stakeholders and intellectually engaging on some of Pakistan's most important development challenges. I would also like to thank all those who reached out with suggestions. And as always, we welcome thoughts on what you would like us to focus on within this development policy series, which complements many of our other dissemination efforts of other research and other collaborations with our partners across academia, think tanks, and researchers. Let me start by thanking our honorable moderator and panelists for joining us today. Dr. Mavish Shaukat, economist at the World Bank, and our panelists, Mr. Rizwan Sherwani, DG Excise and Taxation in Punjab, Dr. Anwar Shah, consultant at the World Bank and also director of the Center for Public Economics at Chengdu Wenjiang, China, Mr. Altaf Sario, Director of Human Resources Management, Karachi Metropolitan Corporation, and Dr. Aisha Pasha, economist and member of the National Assembly, former finance minister for the government of Punjab. And finally, of course, I would like to thank Dr. Iyaz Nabi, chairperson of CDPR and country director of the International Growth Center, IGC of Pakistan, and his team for co-hosting this event with us. Without further ado, let me pass it on to Mavish to engage in what will be a very exciting conversation panelists this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was great. So thank you for inviting me to moderate. I'm really happy to be moderating this webinar on a very important question. And I think Dr. Nabi has laid out why this question is so important very nicely. So I'm not going to talk too much. I want to leave as much time as possible for the discussion. Let me just tell you on how the webinar will be structured. We'll have the first hour or so for a panel discussion, and I'll ask each panelist for opening remarks, so to talk for about 4 to 5 minutes. And then we'll open the floor for a more in-depth discussion and hopefully a back and forth. And then I want to leave 20 minutes at the very end for Q&A with the audience. So for the audience members, if you have questions during the panel discussion, I believe you can type them into the chat box. And then towards the end, I'll direct the questions to the panelists. So those are the logistics. And with that out of the way, let's just go ahead and get started. So why don't we use the order that was just used. Mr. Shervani, if you want to start with your opening remarks.
Yeah, I'll begin with the just an overview, giving you an overview of taxation system in Pakistan. As you know, Pakistan is a 3-tier taxation system, and this is the division of taxes between federal, provincial, and local government. So, robust and broad-based taxes are the federal government, like income, custom duty, and sales tax, and the remaining taxes are with the province, which include property tax, motor vehicle tax, and sales tax on services. As far as the local government is concerned, there's a very, short-based, fixed type of taxes which are with the local government. Like those are mostly fees and charges. And property tax is actually a local government tax. It has been assigned to the provincial government in all provinces, and the provincial government is basically responsible for assessment, collection, and policy of property tax. You see, before going into the technical details of what are the main issues and challenges, you can view the whole series of dependence in terms of at federal, provincial, and local government. The own source revenue of the provincial government is just below 20%, and 80% of the provincial resource requirement comes from federal divisible pool. So this 20% includes sales tax on property tax, motor vehicle taxes, and non-tax revenues as well. In this arrangement, there's a way to do for the local government, and provincial government actually administering this property under years old legislation, Punjab Urban Removal Tax Act 1958. So when you view property tax in terms of the structural arrangement and the design of the property, you see this tax is basically revolves around legislation which is the arrangement or valuation system which were introduced in 1958, where the same kind of rental valuation system is in most colonies, like in Pakistan. The Excise and Taxation Department is staying on with this valuation system. We have made minor changes. We switched from actual rent to rental valuation table. And since in Pakistan, it is very difficult to have access to rental agreements, we were never able to actually effectively and comprehensively evaluate properties for any kind of for levying property tax or any other tax which is related to property tax base. This due to this inability to effectively evaluate property, the total revenue collection of property tax in Punjab is still around 14 billion, which as Dr. Ijaz mentioned, is quite low as compared to the neighboring countries. We have been contemplating to make changes with this legislative framework, and we now to switch over from rental valuation because this is the valuation base which is being used by at least three governments: BOR, local government, excise and taxation at provincial, and federal government at federal level for assessment of transactional taxes, capital gain tax, and income tax as well, advanced income tax. In that context, there's a very little for local government unless we make major structural changes in property tax framework, institutional arrangement. And for that purpose, property valuation is critically important because that will provide a base to at least three government to realistically tax, irrespective with any kind of tax which is levied the base of property. Secondly, then there are exemptions which are being given from the property tax base. Around 40% of the total exemptions goes to widows, vulnerable sections of the society from property tax, and still we don't have any social protection system at provincial level or local government that can give relief to those vulnerable. And consequently, we pay off property tax base and actually create distortions in the property tax base, and which are being misused not only by the taxpayer but by the tax authorities as well. For major changes in property, we have to do a legal framework 1958. We have to segregate authorities which are currently centered in one assessing authority, which is the taxation officer, according to the Punjab Property Tax Act, is responsible for assessment, collection, enforcement, education, audit, and exemption. For all kind of, powers are centered in authority, which is a classic example of conflict of interest case. So for a property tax administration, we need to establish valuation agency at provincial level. We should devolve property tax to the local government for collection and enforcement. We should establish an independent education authority, and we should do away with the current system of exemption giving from the tax, and it should be assigned to some kind of social protection. So this is the legal arrangement, this institutional arrangement we have been contemplating. Dr. Ali Chima has collaborated with the Excise and Taxation Department. We are working on that. Then the program on Pride of World Bank sponsored program, which is basically helping Excise and Taxation Department to establish an evaluation agency. These are the things, the lines where we have been thinking to revamp the existing property tax system in Punjab.
Thank you very much. These are great points, and I hope we can come back to the points you raised on valuations, exemptions, and tax administration reform after the opening remarks. Dr. Shah, would you like to go next?
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. I just organized by opening remarks regarding the questions you posed. So given the limit of time, I will simply make the main points and will not have the time to elaborate on those points, but we can come to those later if there was an interest. Your first question was, what mechanisms have comparator countries used to generate own source revenues? How can these be adapted in Pakistan? Well, local governments are starved for own source revenues in all comparator countries in South Asia. So one has to look beyond those countries to be able to be able to basically find some promising examples. And I think in terms of promising examples, the one example that comes to mind in my mind is China's case. In China, the below province local governments have access to not just the property related taxes, but also personal income tax, corporate income tax, and business taxes on the basis of tax sharing arrangements. Basically, the local governments gets 20% of the personal income tax, 24% of corporate income tax, and 70% of business taxes and 19% of VAT. So those are the major sources of revenues for the People's Republic of China for local governments, and property taxes only contributes to 5% of total own source revenues. And incidentally, in China's case, own source revenues are only 19% of revenues in terms of taxes, but land leasing fees accounts for major source of own source revenues, and it accounts for 56% of own source revenues. And the rest 25% comes from central and provincial transfers. So these are, and in terms of the additional, areas where the local governments has really potential is the environmental taxes and charges and sin taxes and some taxes which are underutilized in Pakistan, like frontage taxes based on the linear front foot of urban property, and basically sin taxes like lottery and gambling taxes, and recreational complexes can be financed based on the selling lifetime rights to seats or to lifetime membership. So these are kind of examples where there can be additional effort. And then second question was, why does property tax collections have been low and how it can be more effective? And there are basically three major reasons come to my mind in terms of the property tax. The property tax is the property tax design is very complex in Pakistan, and it's levied on a narrow base and and with little local autonomy in terms of either the base or the rate. Mr. Sherwani has already elaborated on the issues with the property in this area, but Pakistan has a rental value tax, which is extremely complex to administer because you need to know the capital value plus the life of the assets to determine the annual rental value. And the Pakistan tax does not cover linear properties, wireless communication towers, government properties, illegal, informal, non-profits, charitable, and religious organization properties. So it's a large tax basis out of the tax net. And then residential provincial tax administration, essentially property tax is a provincial tax in practice in Pakistan, because both the tax base and tax rate is determined by the provincial government. And province really does not show much effort in terms of the serious effort, and also it lacks more motivations. And property tax, third is the property tax is not seen as a benefit charge because people hardly receive any services in return. So motivation to pay property tax is very low in Pakistan. And finally, the question is, what are the kind of reforms that are possible? There are six important considerations, I would say. One is keep it simple in design and administration. Yeah, you know, property tax in the market value-based property tax, as in US and Canada, is extremely complex. And the rental value tax is even more complex. So the question is, what can one do which is more simpler, can raise similar revenues or even more revenues? I think that's based on more simple tax like the UK council tax. UK council tax is based on the 8 bands classification of property values, and each band, you know, there is a medium tax rate, and then each band has a differential tax rate. So it's very easy to administer, and it's a very popular tax in UK. And actually, you could raise more revenues from this kind of presumptive tax than the more sophisticated property taxes. And it doesn't require sophisticated tax administration. It doesn't require the kind of cadasters that need to be developed to have a serious property tax. And a tax administration would be very, kind of cost would be very low. So I am simply pointing out as an example, but one can think of, there are many innovations in this area of presumptive property taxes. The second principle is land should be taxed more heavily, and structures and improvements should not be taxed at all or taxed lightly. This is a principle most of the time is not observed. And this is because you want to have property tax be used as a local development tax. And for financing for basically encouraging development, you want to tax the higher intensity of use of land more favorably. And then one should have a differential taxation of residential, commercial, agricultural, and rural properties. And there should be no cross subsidization across different properties, different classification of properties in terms of the property taxes. So business should be taxed for services to business, residents should be taxed for services to residents. So tax rate should reflect those. And agriculture and rural land should be taxed based on services to rural areas. And as rural areas and rural properties have hardly any services, they should be taxed accordingly. And fourth principle is that's broadened the tax base to include government properties, charitable organization, non-profits, informal and illegal properties. And many countries do in this regard to cover all these properties. US and Canada does it. So, I mean, there are the real world examples how to do it. And then use supplementary education meal rate for private taxes for partial financing of schools. And let sunshine be in for placing all ownership, assessment, and tax information in public domain at the internet. For example, in the United States, all property tax information, the ownership, assessed value, and the taxes paid are a public knowledge. So the third question was, how can user charges be utilized for revenue generation in Pakistan? Well, Pakistan does already a lot of user charges, but there are areas that are missing are the environmental taxes and charges and sin taxes, and are under, maybe some of these are levied but underexploited. Now, school fees and hospital charges are not desirable for equity reasons. So education and health are better financed by higher order grants, higher level financing, and the municipal portion of the schooling costs should be borne by the property taxes, by by having a supplementary education meal rate. And finally, what measures can be done to encourage citizens to pay taxes? I think the issue is here, as Dr. Nabi and others have said, demonstrate that you are making a contribution in terms of the quality and access to local services. In this regard, local empowerment is the key for better service delivery, thereby building trust. I mean, here, you know, it's important to know, for example, I come back to China's example where local government is the government, because 75% of all public expenditures are at the local level. And basically, there is a lot of accountability of local governments in China through both internal accountability as through accountability for results, as well as external accountability for party, because the party wants to stay in power, and for it to stay in power, it needs to build the trust of the local people. And there the local government plays the catalyst role in local development. So I think, I mean, there are, there are ways for local governments to build trust, but this trust can only come if local governments are empowered, they have reasonable finances, and they have reasonable kind of authority to deliver most of the public services, and then they are accountable. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shah. Dr. Pasha, would you like to go next? You're on mute. I think you're still on mute. So let me see, maybe I can unmute you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect.
Okay, thank you. And now we will address the questions that you have submitted. First of all, thank you for inviting me over. We will discuss the questions in detail, perhaps when you put them up in the subsequent section. Let me, to begin with, give you an overall flavor of where we are in terms of local finances at this point of time. At this point of time, subnational governments, and this includes the provincial governments of the country as well, Punjab, Sindh, KPK, and Balochistan, they are generating only 8% of the total revenues that are generated in the country. Only 8% of the total tax mobilization is through subnational governments. And if you look at the expenditure distribution between different levels of government, then subnational governments account for 36% of the expenditures. So very clearly, you will see the mismatch, the imbalance. Subnational governments generating 8% of the revenues, while the expenditure responsibilities are 36% of the total expenditures that are being levied, that are being undertaken. So there is clearly a need for higher resource mobilization. And given the fact that at this point of time, overall tax to GDP ratio in the nation as a whole is only, with the debasing on 9% of the GDP, every level of government has to play its role to mobilize revenues. If we have to face a growing population, which has been highlighted by Dr. Ijaz Nabi, we have a big problem ahead of on our hands. Now, at this point of time, only if you look at the subnational governments, including the provincial government, if 1% of the GDP is being generated. The question then arises, is this all that they can potentially generate, or are there any studies which basically give us a size of the potential that they have, and they're not doing so? Well, when I was finance minister in Punjab, actually, it's good to see Sherwani Saab here. He was with me at that time in the Excise and Taxation Department. We undertook, with the help of the World Bank, an assessment of the potential which exists at the subnational government. And we came up with, the study came up with very interesting and remarkable results in some ways. One such statistics I'll quote to you is that almost 80 to 85% of revenues were generated by only 3 to 4%, 4 taxes: property taxes, general sales tax on services, immovable property tax, motor vehicle tax, and stamp duty. The rest of the revenues and the multitude of taxes were really not revenue yielding, and the purpose was not very clear. Some were for regulatory purposes and so on and so forth. But the point was very clear, is that just concentrate on the few, forget about the plethora of tax sources that you have at that level. They're not revenue yielding. They're just creating more harassment and destroying the structure of the taxes. The other very important conclusion that came was very clear from our study was that the tax gap, which is basically the difference between what is being realized and what the potential is, was in the magnitude of 80 to 90%. Basically, this is what additionally can be mobilized given the potential that exists with us. This is a study of Punjab. And let me tell you that Punjab is one of the better provinces, which is when it comes to taxation of these some of the critical services. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that there is tremendous scope for enhancement to be done given the current taxation structure. There is this perception, and provincial governments like to make it all the time, that really the buoyant taxes and the broad-based taxes are with the federal government. We have such little potential, and please look at the federal government for higher tax revenues. Don't look at us. The point is that, yes, there is potential there, most of it, but what you have, you're not mobilizing as well. For me, the growth areas are 2. One, urban immovable property tax, really big. It's supposed to be internationally a tax which is the budget balancing tax revenue income source for municipal governments, and it's not playing that role. And in the context of Punjab, the tax gap or the potential that is being just currently being realized is not even 90%. What I'm saying is that 90% is the gap. The potential that is being realized is close to 10% or so. Shivani Saab may not agree with this, but this is what the World Bank study says. And this is, if you look at the national income accounts and the ownership of dwellings in that sector, the numbers are making a lot of sense. Now, what has, why? Why has there not been emphasis? Without going into the details, which we will go in the later sections, why property tax is not being realized, one such, being a finance minister in the largest province, I can say with some degree of confidence is that we can do a better job. We did a better job when I was at least there, particularly in the context of high mobile revenue potential sources like sales tax on services, even in property tax. I remember very clearly that we did undertake some reforms, and the tax rate growth of the taxes in tax revenues of property tax were averaging about 30% or so at one stage. So there is potential. Why we haven't done? Multiple reasons. One very important reason being lack of political will. If we just decide that this is what needs to be done, we will be willing to incur the political costs of levying that. Second, we are scared of really using, let me say, be very candid about this. There is lack of willingness to undertake automation of tax revenues, breaking the link between taxpayers and tax collectors, really strengthening tax administration and automating it in a very big way so that the leverage for and discretion is minimized. That is one of the main reasons why we see problems like under-reporting of property values at the time of as the base of tax collection and so on and so forth. Complexity that we bring in taxes is one of the other reasons why we have not been able to, even if the person wants to pay tax, collection is, so many governments are involved, there's so much complexity in it. We need to make it very clear. This is very true in the case of sales tax on services, where a taxpayer has to pay, to submit 5 returns, each province, in the case of sales tax, to come to pay the taxes. So it has to be cleaned up. I think what we have to keep in our mind is to, if you want to bring in tax culture, which is missing in Pakistan in general, we need to just develop that, and we need to just make it more easy for people to come in, and also increase the tax compliance. We also need to make the tax administration more effective and more efficient. At this point of time, that's not happening. Let me also, at this point of time, say that the taxation structure that we're talking about local governments now, the taxation structure that we should be really targeting for larger cities, and the smaller cities in Pakistan needs to be a little different. Larger cities can, for their development, they can resort to, I know that's not the main area of focus in this webinar, but municipal bonds for the development, access to capital markets for the development are areas which larger cities can go in for to finance the development of infrastructure. For recurrent expenditures, taxes and user charges have to be the mainstay, and there is potential. We can talk in detail about why that potential is not being utilized and what are the missing gaps. And we also have to realize the fact that the reality of Pakistan, coming up with practical, doable solutions is something that we really need to look forward to. And this I'm talking to in terms of user charges in particular, because we see that there is really very little user charge being levied, even for economically productive activities like irrigation. The user charge at this point of time is not even recovering 20% of the recurrent costs of providing irrigation water in Pakistan. This is a whole area that needs to be looked at. Vast scope exists. And let's, in the detailed sessions, when we are talking about these, we will come up with some ideas for you. But to begin with, I think these are some of the areas we should keep in mind while we are talking about local government finances. Provincial governments plus local governments have to play their roles, and we can no longer hide behind the fact that it's the federal government's domain. They have preempted the taxes, and we don't have enough. There is huge, huge potential. Thank you, and I will now pass it on to you, and look forward to the question answer sessions and the panel discussion later on.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pasha. Mr. Sario, would you like to go next?
Thank you very much for extending an opportunity me to participate in this webinar, which has a panel of very experienced and senior members. Well, my information will be restricted to KMC, but that will be mostly based on my personal experience in the service which I'm doing, although I'm doing as a director HR. But before that, I have experience of serving some other local councils. We all know when we talk about KMC, so we correlated Karachi. Karachi, it used to be a national capital of Pakistan, but despite of shifting of capital to Islamabad, it remains a commercial and industrial capital of Pakistan. Although it has any estimate almost 10% of the population of the country, but it generates almost more than 20% of the national revenue. And if we talk about the FBR collections, it is more than 75%, 80%. It's just from one city, Karachi. But when we talk about the KMC, we get an idea that KMC being premier municipal organization or authority in Karachi it is expected that it should be having a sort of a model revenue mechanism and the service delivery system, which is not. That will be, I'll be explaining why it is not. Can I share a few slides? If you extend share screen facility, I want to show some slides to the participants and members.
Zora, would you be able to give him that permission?
As I was talking about the KMC and when we correlate in Karachi, let me inform the members that Karachi is such a big city that there are so many other municipal service providers. Like at that moment, we have 7 DMCs, that is district municipal corporations. We have 26 towns which have been recently notified by the local government department. We have more than 230 union committees. And apart from this local government municipal authorities, we have 6 cantonment boards just in one city. And let me tell you, there's a abnormal arrangement when we talk about cantonment boards. Those cantonment boards cover approximately area of 60% of the Karachi, but they just cater to just 30% of the population of the Karachi.
Mr. Sawyer, I don't think, I think you can share, yes.
Yeah, is it visible?
It is visible. I'll just ask if you can still keep the timing to 5 minutes, just so that we can come back to the discussion.
Yeah, well, just now I will be focusing the questions which were given to me. Through this, just one slide, I want to show that this is just overview of current budget revenue, which we have planned this year, 2021, current year, 2021. You can see we had almost 25 billions or 26 billion budget. Just let me tell you, if I correlated it, in 2011-12, KMC used to have a budget of 50 billion, but after 10 years, it is 26 billion. And if we see, we were supposed to collect, we planned to collect almost 4 billion rupees from own sources, which we say till January we were supposed to collect 2.3 billion, but actual collection is just 500 million. So you can see mainly we depend on the government of Sindh share or whatever they provide in terms of OZT, which is Octroi Zilla tax, or grant and aid. If there is no grant and aid OZT share, you will see that we hardly survive to even pay our just pay and pension expenditures. And out of this 7 months, you can see it's just a little bit more than 5% share of the KMC collection. Now, we are talking about one of the oldest, one of the largest municipal corporation, municipal organization in a country, and its own resource from a city which is generating more than 20% of the national revenue. It is generating just 5% from own sources. When we talk about the expenditure, now whatever we have got from government of Sindh or what we have collected from our own sources, we are expending more than 95%, 99% on just establishment charges, just paying salaries and pension and just few contingencies. And in last rows, you can see development ADP, we were hardly able to return to the city, such a big city, just 18 million on development. So actually what we are doing, that whatever we are getting, we are just spending on maintaining our own organization. We are not paying back to the city. So this is a big issue because we are not able to generate so much revenues. There are many reasons why we are not generating so much own revenues. Actually, as I talked during the local government ordinance 2001 arrangement, all the major civic institution, organization, they were merged in KMC, and it was called as the City District Government Karachi at that time. And there was a lot of revenue generation. But after the new enactment, that was 2013 Act of the Local Government, Sindh Local Government Act 2013, those organizations, they were separated from KMC. So KMC was left just a skeleton of organization, very limited, with very limited resources, but with limited functions as well. So many functions were diverted or transferred to those independent organizations or development authorities. That's why we were not able to generate the revenue. Just few of the challenges which we face for not generating our own revenue, that in Sindh, the last PFC award was in 2007. After 2007, no PFC award has been notified, and Sindh started very well because that PFC award was actually based on multi-sectorial and multi-indicator distribution. But it is like 14 years, we are not able to have new PFC award. There are so many changes, demographic changes, population changes in the city. And so we are not getting what we are supposed to get. Similarly, the major chunk which we get from government of Sindh is in terms of OZT share. You know, in 1999, OZT octroi tax was abolished from all the local councils. Hello?
Yes,
am I audible? Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Okay, so in 1999, octroi tax was abolished and OZT share was given to all the local council. But the formula which was agreed with the local council, that was not updated, enhanced later on. Whatever we were getting in 1999, it was not subsequently raised. Just to give you an idea, I was the administrator of Hyderabad Municipal Corporation, and we were getting almost 100 million a month. But according to one of the audit reports, Sindh Audit Department report, we had an audit of 10 years. What they calculated that in those 10 years, HMC was actually getting 1.6 billion rupees less than what the share it should get through OZT arrangement. Okay, coming over to another point, the property tax. Other panelists also talked about the property tax. Just to give an idea, property tax is not collected by local council in Sindh. It is collected by Excise and Taxation Department, which has not a robust machinery in the field, especially for a big city like Karachi to collect what potential it has. Just to give you an idea, last year, last year, they collected 1.6 billion from Karachi, and just Mumbai is getting almost more than 55, 56 billion rupees just from one city, and we were just getting 1.6 billion. According to one study of the World Bank, with existing arrangement, we can collect in a professional manner. We can start collecting those tax more than 10 to 15 billions within few years, but that is not collected. Once you're not collecting as per your potential from a big city like Karachi, you're not getting the money. And there are more tax, fire tax and conservancy tax. Recently, our administrator, Barrister Muzza Wahab, had a talks with K Electric that if we can have arrangement to collect fire tax and conservancy tax through like bill, like PTV fee is collected. According to that estimate, if we start collecting from 2.3 million customers through bills, KMC will be able to collect more than 10 billion rupees in a year, which at the moment we are not collecting more than 250 million rupees. So there's such a big difference. Similarly, we have so many other taxes. Now, why we are not able to collect those taxes? The biggest problem is one of our panelists talk that we have three tiers of the taxes in Pakistan. It's a national tax, there are provincial taxes and local government taxes. But when we talk about the local government, we don't have robust and efficient tax collection administration like we have at the national level, FBR, and at provincial level, Sindh Revenue Board, Punjab Revenue Authority. No authority, no local council has such a good tax collection authority. Let me tell you out of my personal experience, when I joined KMC, even now in 2022, don't have a tax collection department. We have just one small setup to collect charge parking, one small section to collect utility taxes. So you can understand if an organization does not have a good collection administration, how they are able to generate their own revenues. One more challenge which we face in KMC that there are so many local councils in one city and their jurisdictions are not well defined. There have been many attempts in the past as well, but due to multiple factors, there are political factors, there are social factors, those jurisdictions have been not defined. So there is sometime overlapping and sometime vacuum areas where those taxes are not collected by any agency due to those issues of the jurisdiction. And
Mr. Sario, I apologize. I'm going to interrupt, but I think because we're at it's 6:05, but this is a great way to discussion. Yeah, no, thank you so much. This is a great point because I wanted to follow up on the point that you're raising right now in the discussion. So let me open it up now for more discussion, and I'll ask the audience members if you guys have questions, please feel free to submit to the Q&A, and I'll try to feed that to the panelists. And Dr. Nabi and Mr. Jajulis, if you guys have questions as well, please jump in. But let me start with my own question. And this is something that Mr. Sario, you just started to touch on, and Dr. Pasha, which you raised. So I want to ask the panelists, there seems to be a consensus on what reforms are needed. It seems that we're broadly in agreement. Now the question is, why haven't these reforms been taken? What are the key challenges to implementing these reforms? And then I want to touch on the point that Dr. Pasha raised, which is if reforms, major reforms are not possible, or if they're not possible in the short term, what can we do in the immediate term? What are some small scale solutions that we might already have at our disposal? And what are the potential for those types of smaller changes? So I'll open the floor again to the panelists and anyone who wants to start. But that's the question that came up.
With your permission, Mavish, can I ask my question?
Absolutely.
Okay. My question is really, well, it's not really a question. It's a shared sense of grief with Dr. Pasha. Dr. Pasha was a finance minister, and she worked a lot on mobilizing revenues. I was advisor to the Chief Minister of Punjab, and I worked intensively in the early part of my association with him on trying to raise more revenues through property taxes. And I completely agree with her that the issue is not that Punjab bureaucrats don't know the technical details of what needs to be done. That's not the issue at all. Mr. Sherwani is here, his predecessors, all of them, World Bank, our own experts, they've all been pointing out. At the end of the day, it's the political economy of Punjab, and I presume the country, which stymies all of these technical attempts to reform the tax structure. So I hope that your panelists at some point will talk about those political economy issues.
Thank you. So the floor is open. Anyone who wants to respond.
If I may say, on the political economy issues, the incentives for the political parties, the federal government, the provincial government, civil servants, all are aligned against serious empowerment of local governments and serious tax reforms. So in that case, you know, who will bell the cat? There is really no way out of this dilemma unless you know, there is a bottom-up grassroots movements demanding that the citizens should be treated as governors and not clients or consumers. And they should be basically, I think, they should not pay any taxes until they have a guaranteed access to quality public services. So only then such reforms can take place in Pakistan. I think short of that, I mean, we have been talking this over many decades, and the needle has not moved a bit. It has in fact moved backwards. I mean, look at local governments in Pakistan in the 70s. They were more autonomous and they had greater powers than they have now. You know, at that time, 10% of the consolidated public expenditures were done by local governments. Today, it's less than 5%. So, I mean, the numbers speaks for themselves. And if you look at the local government codes in all provinces, local government is basically a handmaiden of the provinces and subservient to provinces with no autonomy at all and no discretion at all. So local government don't exist in Pakistan. So as a result, I am very pessimistic that these reforms can take place in the current political environment because, you know, the civil servants, even if you forget about the political parties and politics, even the civil servants, you know, they're basically take a pride in dismissing local governments. I mean, if you look at Pakistan's history, the civil servants who acting as administrator of the local governments have always worked to undermine the local governments. So it's, I think all the powerful interests are aligned against local empowerment.
Mehvesh, let me come in if I can at this stage and about this important question. I think the point that I want to emphasize here is that property tax has a lot of potential. Sales tax and so on and so forth are more in the nature of a provincial tax. And if you want to focus on local taxes, property tax is one area where you really can focus on. It has very high revenue yield potential, and this is something that we need to talk about. Now, as to why we have not been able to mobilize the potential that exists, I think, strictly speaking, there are 5 reasons why not. One, the basis on which the property tax is levied, the assessment of rental values there is massive undervaluation. And on the basis on which you levy a property tax and the actual value of that property, the rental value is vastly different. So there is undervaluation. Second, the main are the exemptions. The differences that the exemptions that we allow. Exemption given to owner-occupied versus rented property. Exemption given to widowed properties and small properties, and so on and so forth. The third important area why it's not there is that The weak tax administration. Again, I will continue to say this. When we were there, I was there in Punjab. I remember, Sherwani Saab will tell you better. They undertook a survey of properties, and they identified, I think, something like 300,000 properties which existed but were not on the cadastral registers. So there was underreporting, and that was one of the reasons why getting a hold of automated property taxes would help, and conducting these kinds of surveys and putting them on the computer will help a lot. This is the third main reason. The fourth main reason is that as city sizes increase, the rating areas, you have to declare an area rating area for you to be able to levy property tax there. Governments have not been able to update and expand rating areas in line with higher urbanization. As more urban areas, the city boundaries expand, rating area should expand, property taxes should be levied. There has been a little delay in all of that, and that's one of the main reasons. And of course, the fact that 85% of the revenues are really go to the local governments doesn't provide much of an incentive to the provincial governments as well, because they incur the political cost and they don't get the revenue yield. So these are, I think, some of the reasons why property taxes have not done as well. A reform process was put in place in Punjab, whereby we did increase the rental values, the valuation tables for the properties. And I think we decided that we won't increase the tax by more than 50%, so that there isn't popular uprising against tax payment. We will only revaluate the properties, expand the valuation base, and correspondingly bring down the property tax rate so that the tax burden doesn't increase very high, too much. And as a consequence, the property tax rate in Punjab was brought down from 25% to 5%, and the property valuation tables were improved and increased to bring them more in line with market values. That exercise happened. Then, as I said, properties were surveyed and more properties were added. Then the third thing that we did at that stage was that the rating areas were expanded. There were resistance. We found political resistance to it, but nonetheless, it happened. And the owner-occupied properties were given less of concession. These reforms were brought in. And Sherwani Saab will here substantiate it further and will bear me out that this did lead to an increase in property tax rates. But the problem was that it increased it, but the exercise of improving the remission, withdrawing the remission so that the market values are, the assessed value becomes closer to the market value, didn't carry on for 5 years as it was supposed to in a reform thinking and enough a reform package because of, I think, political reasons. So I will come up with an idea which is new, and I would want to, in fact, before I do this relating to property taxes, let me talk a little bit about user charges here, because the two are very close. There is water rates. No, there is no proper water rate system either for consumption, drinking water, nor for irrigation water. Leaving alone irrigation water, let's just talk about potable water at this stage. Let's talk about drainage and conservancy charges at this stage. My own suggestion, which we wanted to bring towards the end of my tenure, was that let's clean up the system. Let's not focus on so many taxes, so many levies. Let's make it more practical, doable. Now, in line with all this thinking, what I'm suggesting is the following. We need to update property rental values. FBR has come up with valuation tables which are very different from the valuation tables of both the Board of Revenue of the province and what Excise and Taxation has for the purpose of rental value. Now, getting a hold of rental value is very difficult. They have a formula which is, I think, outdated. I think, which does not give them a very accurate assessment of what the rental values are. They have some broad criteria, which I'm sure Shavani Saab can elaborate more on, but they're not truly representative of what the real rental value of properties are. So as a suggestion, now that FBR has updated, has come up with these capital values, let's not do away with this, this practice that we have, that excise and taxation for one particular property is using a different value than what FBR is using for it, or what Board of Revenue is using for it at the time of transactions. There has to be one standard value for each property, irrespective of who is using it for what purpose. Values of properties cannot be different like we have at this point of time. FBR is using, as I'm at the cost of repeating, let me repeat it again. FBR uses a different value for a property when it's levying its own capital taxes related in advanced income taxes and so on and so forth, when it's levying them. Excise and taxation is using a different value, converting into a rental value of what they are using. Board of Revenue is using a different value at the time of transaction of that property for levying of stamp duties and registration fees and so on and so forth. So this practice has to go. There has to be one valuation table. FBR has done it. Apparently they have done, they can be adjusted, they can be changed, they can be reformed, but the concept has to be one rental, one value of property for all kinds of taxation. FBR can use a capital value. They can, if they do not have a better way of a formula of coming to assessing rental values from capital value, I'm saying let's use a proportion of capital values for rental values and piggyback with it and attach with it user charges like water and conservancy and drainage. I think this practice was done by KMC when they linked all of them to rental values and collected one levy. And that levy was used not only for the regular municipal services like maintenance of roads and street lighting, but they were also used for supplying water distribution and for cleaning up of streets and so on and so forth. So this would be one way of cleaning up a lot of mess and coming up with some decent revenues so that good service delivery can be undertaken. This we have the urban unit in Punjab has worked on this concept, and they have demonstrated that if you implement this, your revenues can increase multiple times without really incurring a lot of additional expenditures. So this thought I leave for you for discussion in today's webinar, and get some ideas out of, KMC is sitting here. They, I remember very distinctly that they have conservancy tax linked to the rental values as well. So instead of going in for user charges, which will never happen in Pakistan, metering of water will not happen. Take this for granted from me. Garbage disposal will never happen. We have established separate companies for all of this also in Punjab. The revenue is always an issue. They are largely dependent on grants to finance their operations. User charges is a concept which just isn't taking off in Pakistan. So my most, not the ideal, but pragmatic solution to the problem is let's have just one big, not that big, but one levy linked to the capital value through which you finance rental property taxes. Linked to it is water rate, linked to it is sewerage and conservancy rate, and you finance it therefore. Reduce the harassment for the taxpayer, reduce multiplicity of taxes for everyone, reduce the chance of more leakage and collaboration between taxpayer and corruption and so on and so forth, and come up with a cleaner system where there are revenues for your city government.
Thank you, Dr.
This may sound a little different, but given the fact that I've been in government, I've seen how it works. The simpler you make it, the more likelihood that it will go through is higher. We go for optimism and we end up getting nowhere.
Thank you, Dr. Pasha.
So this is one suggestion. And let's see, let's open it up and see how people react to it.
I want to give Mr. Sherwani a chance to respond.
Yeah, we have discussed number of issues and challenges and problems with the property tax system, but the question then remains where to start from. What is actually the critically important for revamping and reforming the property tax system in Pakistan? The most important thing, there should be policy harmonization between 3 tiers of the government. There's a single base property which is being taxed by the federal, provincial, and local government. Federal government tax actually capital gain tax, and then the transactional taxes, advance income tax, all kind of presumptive taxation is done on property tax. Provincial government actually again property on for taxes, for stamp fee. We also collect property tax from property. So there are multiple, comes around 15 to 16 the same property tax base. So I think the starting point is that there should be a policy harmonization among all the 3 tiers of the government. The tax rates should be rationalized. And most important link for reforming all these 3 property taxation is property realistic valuation of the property. Unless we actually switch over to a realistic property valuation system, will not be able to tax property on a basis. There's a disproportionate distribution of tax burden. You see, and we have captured number of properties in Punjab where 4 or 5 air conditioners and 5 Perla properties, and those properties have been exempted. So it's 40% of the total tax base have been just because of political consideration. So I think the provincial government, if want to devolve this property tax from to local government, and it transfers to the local government, a bureaucratic run provincial government to bureaucratic run local government, I think it will be meaningless unless there's a elected local government, and the segregation of authority. Valuation is a separate subject. Property tax assessment and enforcement is a separate subject. Adjudication is a separate subject. So we should give power to the local government to decide the rate of the property taxes for all kind of provincial, local government, federal government by one agency, and tax rates by each respective tier of the government. So local government power to decide the rate of property tax, whether it should be 5%, 4%, 3%. So that will increase the political acceptability, because deciding the rate on that particular valuation of the property that will help the local government to raise desired resources for their resource requirement to run and provide the services to the citizen.
Thank you, Mr. Sherwani. So let me jump to a related question. And I know Dr. Pasha has to leave promptly at 6:30, so we'll try to close by then. A number of people in the audience have raised the perspective of citizens. So all of these reforms are dependent on the assumption that citizens are going to be willing to pay property tax. As Dr. Shah pointed out in his opening remarks, there's a lack of trust in the state. And there's a sense that people don't get the quality services in return for paying property tax. So what can be done to rebuild this trust and address this issue of this disconnect between the taxes that people are paying and the services that they end up receiving?
If I can add something in context KMC, please.
Sure.
Well, when we talk about the response from citizens, is that if I talk in context of Karachi, we have an organization in the name of K Electric. Before privatization, the condition of K Electric was not different, and they were unable to collect whatever services they were providing, but they transformed their not only services, but collection mechanism. And then we comparatively, it is a good case in terms of in context of the Karachi. Now there are areas which also constitute Kachi Abadis, slum areas, but still they are getting a substantive recovery against the services which they are providing. But that's not case with the local councils or local government in case of KMC, because people don't trust on the services which we provide. Till the time we don't improve the quality of services, we don't expect that they are going to pay the taxes in the same area which they are paying to some other agencies. So it's not about tax fatigue or tax morale, which should be affected for all the departments, but that's not case in Karachi. There are organizations which are collecting a very, very good percentage of taxes from those areas from which KMC or DMC or other local governments are unable to collect. Because the services which we provide, till the time we are not going to improve our quality, we are unable to collect the taxes related to our services. Thanks.
Another example, if I may cite, is the kind of citizens charter or clients charters in Philippines and in Malaysia, where the several municipalities have announced an open commitment that these are the quality and standards of services citizens should expect. And the government, there is a process to go local government to hold to account if those standards are not met in terms of the access and quality. So there are citizens redress and complaint process and mechanisms to address those issues if the standards specified by municipality itself are not met. And that can be a source of building the trust, because municipal government can say, based on the resources we have, this is the best we can do, and hold us to account for that.
Thank you, Dr. Shah. So I think a number of our panelists have to leave exactly at 6:30. So let me close here, and I want to just thank everyone for this excellent discussion, and also to the audience members. And I want to apologize because a number of people raised very good questions that we weren't able to get to. So I'll request CDPR to maybe have a follow-up session at some point on this same topic, because I think there's still a lot more to discuss. But thank you all for the excellent points you raised. I really enjoyed this discussion, and I think the audience members did as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.